Welcome to Lost at 3 a.m. Put your phone down, close your eyes, and let this be the last video you hear tonight. Relax, breathe, and let's begin. Imagine waking up in a world that looks almost the same as yesterday, but something's just off. Maybe it's the way people dress, the technology they use, or the fact that your parents act like complete strangers. And then it hits you. You're not in the present anymore. You're stuck in the past, and the only way back home is through a machine built by a mad scientist. This is Back to the Future. More than just a sci-fi movie, Back to the Future is a story about destiny, family, and the choices that shape our lives. It's a film that perfectly blends comedy, adventure, and time travel, creating something that still feels fresh, even decades after it was first released. When Back to the Future hit theaters in 1985, no one expected it to become one of the most beloved films of all time. But somehow, a movie about a time-traveling teenager and his eccentric scientist friend became an instant classic, changing pop culture forever. It wasn't just the fast-paced storytelling or the groundbreaking special effects that made the movie special. It was the heart behind it, the idea that our past, present, and future are all connected, and that even the smallest actions can have consequences we never see coming. But how did this movie come to be? How did a simple idea about meeting your parents in high school turn into one of the most iconic films ever made? And what went on behind the scenes that almost changed the movie as we know it? Tonight, we're going back in time to uncover the history, secrets, and legacy of Back to the Future. So sit back, relax, and imagine yourself stepping into a DeLorean, its doors lifting like the wings of a time machine as you prepare for the journey ahead. Because where we're going, we don't need roads. Every great story starts with a single idea. For Back to the Future, that idea came from a high school yearbook and a simple question. What if you could meet your parents when they were teenagers? It was the early 1980s, and screenwriter Bob Gale was visiting his parents' house when he stumbled upon his father's old yearbook. Flipping through the pages, he had a thought. Would I have been friends with my dad if we were the same age? It was a strange, almost ridiculous idea, but it stuck with him. What if a teenager could go back in time and actually meet their parents before they became, well, their parents? Gale took the idea to his friend and longtime collaborator, Robert Zemeckis, and together they started working on the script. But making a time travel movie was tricky. They didn't want it to be too serious or too complex. Instead, they wanted a story that was fun, heartfelt, and completely different from any sci-fi film that had come before it. The early versions of the script had some wild differences from the movie we know today. For one, the time machine wasn't a DeLorean, it was a refrigerator. The original idea had Marty using a nuclear explosion to power his trip back to the future, but that was quickly scrapped when they realized it was too dangerous and a little too complicated for a family movie. Then came the next challenge, getting the movie made. At first, no one wanted it. Studios kept rejecting the script, calling it too light-hearted, saying it didn't have enough raunchy humor to fit in with other popular teen movies at the time. Ironically, Disney rejected it for the opposite reason, saying the idea of a kid almost dating his own mother was too risque for their brand. For a while, it seemed like Back to the Future might never happen, until one person changed everything. That person was Steven Spielberg. He had worked with Gale and Zemeckis before and believed in their vision. With Spielberg's support, Universal Pictures finally gave the green light. Back to the Future was happening. But their challenges were far from over. They had the script, they had the studio, but there was still one major question left. Who would play Marty McFly? And that's when everything almost fell apart. It's impossible to imagine Back to the Future without Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. His quick wit, natural charisma, and effortless delivery made the character unforgettable. But what if I told you he wasn't the original choice? In fact, someone else played Marty McFly for weeks of filming before being replaced. That actor was Eric Stoltz. When production first started, The filmmakers wanted Michael J. Fox from the beginning. He was already a rising star thanks to his role on Family Ties, and his comedic timing was perfect for Marty. But there was a problem. Fox's shooting schedule for Family Ties made it nearly impossible for him to commit to a full-length movie. With Fox unavailable, the role went to Eric Stoltz, an incredibly talented actor known for his dramatic performances. And for a while, everything seemed fine. The cast and crew started filming, and Stoltz gave a serious, method-acting approach to Marty McFly. But as production continued, something wasn't working. The problem wasn't that Stoltz was a bad actor, he just wasn't Marty McFly. His version of the character was too serious, too intense, lacking the light-hearted energy that made the story fun. The comedy just wasn't landing. The chemistry between Stoltz and Christopher Lloyd, who played Doc Brown, felt off. The filmmakers knew they had a problem, but replacing the lead actor after weeks of filming was a huge risk. It meant throwing out everything they had shot and starting over, costing the studio millions of dollars. But director Robert Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg knew the movie wouldn't work unless they got Marty's casting right. And so, they made the toughest decision of the entire production. They fired Eric Stoltz and went back to their first choice, Michael J. Fox. Fox was still busy with Family Ties, but now that the show's production schedule had loosened up, he agreed to do both. The result? One of the most exhausting work schedules imaginable. For months, Fox filmed Family Ties during the day and Back to the Future at night, sometimes only getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep before heading to his next shoot. He barely had time to rest, but he made it work, bringing the perfect mix of charm, humor, and energy to Marty McFly. The decision to recast Marty was risky, expensive, and controversial, but in the end, it saved the movie. Without Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future wouldn't have been the same. And just like that, Marty McFly was finally ready to go back in time. Every great hero needs a great mentor, and in Back to the Future, that mentor is Dr. Emmett Brown, the wild-haired, fast-talking, and slightly unhinged scientist who turns a DeLorean into the world's coolest time machine. But Doc Brown isn't just a side character, he's the heart of the entire franchise. Played by Christopher Lloyd, Doc Brown is the kind of character that could have easily become a cliché. Just another wacky scientist with big ideas and no common sense. But Lloyd brought depth, energy, and genuine warmth to the role, turning Doc into one of the most beloved movie characters of all time. But what if I told you Christopher Lloyd almost never took the role? When casting for Doc Brown, the studio originally approached John Lithgow and even considered Jeff Goldblum. But when those didn't work out, the role went to Christopher Lloyd, who wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. In fact, he initially turned it down, but everything changed when his wife convinced him to give the script another read. The moment he saw the potential in the character, he knew he couldn't say no. The secret to Lloyd's performance? Pure, unfiltered energy. From the moment he appears in Back to the Future, Doc Brown is electric. He moves in bursts, gesturing wildly as he explains time travel with absolute conviction. He's the kind of scientist who would build a nuclear-powered time machine in a mall parking lot and not see a single problem with it. But despite his eccentric nature, Doc Brown isn't just comic relief. He's the emotional core of the story. He genuinely cares about Marty and risks everything to help him get back to 1985 safely. His iconic catchphrase, "Great Scott," became one of the most quoted lines in movie history. And then there's the DeLorean, the time machine that Doc spent 30 years building, perfecting every little detail to create the greatest scientific breakthrough of all time. The moment he utters the legendary words, "If my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit. You know you're in for something special." But while Doc may have seemed completely fearless, one moment proves otherwise. The scene where Marty tries to warn him about his own death, even though Doc insists that no one should know too much about their own future. You can see the struggle in his eyes. Deep down, he knows that what Marty is saying is true, and that small moment adds a layer of vulnerability to his character. making him feel even more real. Christopher Lloyd's performance turned Doc Brown into a sci-fi legend, a character who remains just as entertaining today as he was in 1985. Whether he's screaming about flux capacitors, screaming at Marty for messing with the space-time continuum, or just being his chaotic genius self, Doc Brown is the kind of character that only comes along once in a lifetime. And without him, Back to the Future wouldn't be the same. If you had to pick the most iconic time machine in movie history, chances are your mind immediately jumps to one thing: the DeLorean. With its gull-wing doors, sleek stainless steel body, and glowing flux capacitor, the DeLorean didn't just take Marty McFly through time, it became one of the most legendary cars in film history. But the DeLorean wasn't always the first choice. In the early drafts of the script, the time machine was originally a refrigerator. Yes, you heard that right. Marty was supposed to climb inside an old refrigerator, and the time travel process involved surviving a nuclear explosion. But Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale quickly realized two major problems. First, having kids think they could time travel by locking themselves in fridges? Not a great idea. Second, it just wasn't cool enough. So they made a decision that would change movie history forever. They turned the time machine into a car, but not just any car. It had to be something futuristic, something that would stand out. And that's where the DeLorean DMC-12 came in. At the time, DeLoreans were rare and mysterious. Designed by John DeLorean, the car was supposed to be the future of automobiles, with its stainless steel frame and unique doors. But in reality, the company was a massive failure. Production was rushed, sales were terrible, and the company eventually collapsed under scandal. But for Back to the Future, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the DeLorean looked like something from another world, and when the filmmakers added the glowing flux capacitor, the time circuits, and the fire trails left behind at 88 miles per hour, it transformed into the greatest time machine ever imagined. One of the most famous lines in the movie comes from Doc Brown himself. If you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style? And that's exactly what they did. The DeLorean's speed-based time travel system made for some of the most intense and exciting scenes in the entire movie. The moment Marty races toward the clock tower, lightning striking at the exact right moment, is one of the most unforgettable moments in sci-fi history. And yet, filming with the DeLorean wasn't easy. The car was incredibly difficult to drive, constantly breaking down on set. The interior was cramped, making it hard to film inside. And fun fact, the speedometer in the real DeLorean only went up to 85 miles per hour, meaning they had to fake the 88 miles per hour mark for the movie. But despite all of that, the DeLorean became one of the most beloved movie props ever made. Even today, fans still dream of owning one, and you can find them at conventions, car shows, and even real-life replicas built by enthusiasts. It's not just a car, it's a portal to adventure, to nostalgia, to the impossible. Because in Back to the Future, time travel wasn't about some complicated machine hidden in a lab. It was about hitting the gas, reaching 88 miles per hour, and watching the world around you disappear in a flash of light. And that's why, nearly 40 years later, the DeLorean is still the most famous time machine of all time. Time travel is one of the trickiest concepts in science fiction. Some movies make it overly complicated. Others ignore the rules entirely. But Back to the Future found the perfect balance. Simple enough to follow, but complex enough to feel real. At the heart of it all is one rule: mess with the past, and the future changes with it. When Marty McFly first travels back to 1955, he accidentally prevents his parents from meeting. This small mistake threatens to erase his entire existence, setting off a race against time to fix history before he fades away completely. The way time travel works in Back to the Future follows a cause and effect logic. Every action Marty takes in 1955 has a direct impact on the future. Change one thing, like knocking his father out of the way of a speeding car, and suddenly, his mother falls for him instead. It's a butterfly effect in motion. The movie also introduces a brilliant visual cue to track the consequences of time travel. The fading photograph of Marty and his siblings. The more the timeline is altered, the more his family disappears from the picture. It's a genius way of showing the stakes without needing long, confusing explanations. Then there's the paradox factor. At one point, Marty plays guitar at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, inspiring a kid named Marvin Berry to call his cousin Chuck Berry, giving him the idea for Johnny B. Good. But wait, if Chuck Berry was inspired by Marty playing the song, then where did the song actually come from? This kind of loop logic, also called a bootstrap paradox, is something that sci-fi fans love to debate. And let's not forget the 1.21 gigawatts of power needed to travel through time. The idea of a nuclear-powered flux capacitor might not be scientifically accurate, but the movie makes it feel real. The idea that time travel needs an exact speed, 88 miles per hour, and an exact amount of energy, 1.21 gigawatts, makes it seem like an actual formula instead of just movie magic. In later films, we learn more about alternate timelines, how changing history can create new realities instead of just a single, fixed future. This comes into play in Back to the Future Part 2, when Biff steals the DeLorean and gives his younger self a sports almanac, creating an alternate 1985 where he becomes a powerful tyrant. Unlike some time travel stories that get bogged down in technical details, Back to the Future keeps things fun and intuitive. It doesn't ask the audience to understand complex quantum mechanics, just to believe in one simple truth. If you mess with time, time messes with you. And that's why the time travel in Back to the Future still holds up today. It's not about scientific accuracy. It's about telling a great story where every decision has consequences. Because whether you're trying to fix the past or protect the future, one thing is clear. Time travel is never simple. One of the best things about Back to the Future is that no matter how many times you watch it, you always find something new. From hidden clues about the future to subtle details that reward observant viewers, the movie is packed with Easter eggs and fun facts that make it even more fun to revisit. One of the most famous hidden details comes from Twin Pines Mall. When Marty first arrives in 1955, he crashes the DeLorean into one of Old Man Peabody's pine trees. At the time, it seems like a throwaway joke until Marty returns to 1985 and sees the sign has changed from Twin Pines Mall to Lone Pine Mall. It's a tiny but brilliant detail that proves even the smallest actions in the past can affect the future. Another fun Easter egg happens at the clock tower. In the opening credits, there's a shot of Doc Brown's laboratory, and on his bookshelf, there's a small clock with a tiny figure of a man hanging from the minute hand, foreshadowing the exact moment when Doc hangs from the real clock tower near the end of the movie. And speaking of the clock tower, here's a fun fact. The exact time that lightning strikes, 10:04 p.m., is also hidden throughout the movie, appearing on clocks, newspapers, and even on Doc Brown's watch. It's a small but clever way of keeping the tension building throughout the film. Then there's the cameo by Huey Lewis, the musician behind The Power of Love, which became one of the most iconic songs in the franchise. He actually appears in the movie as the high school teacher who tells Marty his band is too loud. A great inside joke considering how much The Power of Love is associated with the film's success. And if you look closely during the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, you'll notice a background extra with a camcorder filming the event. That's because, in Back to the Future Part 2, we see Marty watching himself play guitar from the first movie. The fact that the extra was placed there in the first film proves the filmmakers had planned the sequel's time travel moments long before it was even filmed. Another small but fun detail is Marty's alias in 1955, Calvin Klein. In the movie, Lorraine assumes that's his real name because it's written on his underwear. But in international versions of the film, it had to be changed to Pierre Cardin in France and Levi Strauss in Spain, since those brands were more recognizable in those countries. But one of the best Easter eggs is hidden in plain sight. The license plate on the DeLorean, which reads Outer Time. Not only is it a clever nod to the time travel theme, but it also perfectly describes Marty's situation throughout the movie, always running out of time. Every time you watch Back to the Future, you're bound to spot something new, whether it's a hidden visual clue, a clever joke, or a tiny detail that ties the trilogy together. The film is packed with secrets that keep fans coming back for more. And that's what makes Back to the Future so timeless, not just because it's about time travel, but because there's always something left to discover. Some movies come and go, others become a permanent part of pop culture, and Back to the Future is one of them. When it was released in 1985, no one expected it to become one of the most beloved films of all time, but something about Marty McFly, Doc Brown, and a time-traveling DeLorean struck a chord with audiences everywhere. It was the perfect mix of sci-fi, adventure, humor, and heart, and it hasn't faded with time. From the moment it hit theaters, Back to the Future was an instant classic, topping the box office and becoming the highest-grossing film of the year. Critics praised it, fans loved it, and it quickly became one of the most quoted and rewatched movies ever made. But the real test of a movie's impact isn't just how well it does at the box office, it's how it lives on in the years after. And Back to the Future has been everywhere ever since. The movie inspired 2 sequels, an animated TV series, a theme park ride, video games, comic books, and even a Broadway musical. The DeLorean itself became one of the most famous cars in film history, and even decades later, people still dream of owning one. But the influence of Back to the Future goes even further. The movie shaped how people think about time travel, influencing everything from TV shows like Rick and Morty to superhero movies like Avengers Endgame. The way it played with cause and effect, paradoxes, and alternate timelines set the standard for time travel storytelling. And let's not forget how the movie inspired real-life technology. Back to the Future Part 2 imagined a future with hoverboards, smart glasses, video calls, and fingerprint scanning, many of which actually exist now. While we may not have flying cars just yet, the movie's vision of the future helped shape what people expected from technology in the real world. Even today, Back to the Future remains a fan favorite, celebrated at conventions, in cosplay, and through countless references in pop culture. Every October 21st, the date Marty travels to in the future, fans celebrate Back to the Future Day, a testament to how much the movie still means to people. And perhaps the most impressive part, unlike so many other franchises, Back to the Future has never been rebooted or remade. Despite Hollywood's obsession with reboots, director Robert Zemeckis and writer Bob Gale have firmly stated that there will never be a remake as long as they're alive, and fans wouldn't have it any other way, because some movies don't need to be remade. Some movies are perfect just the way they are, and Back to the Future isn't just a movie, it's a piece of cinematic history that will never fade, no matter how much time passes. When Back to the Future Part 2 sent Marty McFly to the far-off future of October 21st, 2015, audiences were amazed by the futuristic world the filmmakers imagined. Flying cars, self-lacing sneakers, hoverboards, it all seemed so possible. But now that we've actually lived through 2015, how much did the movie really get right? Surprisingly, more than you might think. One of the most impressive predictions was video calling. In the movie, we see Marty talking to Needles through a wall-mounted video screen, something that looked futuristic in 1989, but is completely normal today. With Zoom, FaceTime, and Skype, video calling has become a daily part of life, making this one of the movie's most accurate forecasts. Another big one? Wearable technology. Doc Brown wears smart glasses that look eerily similar to Google Glass, and Marty's kids use hands-free devices to answer calls at the dinner table. Today, smartwatches, wireless earbuds, and VR headsets have become standard, proving that the movie wasn't far off when it came to the evolution of tech. And then there's cashless transactions. In 2015, Marty is told he has been fired via a digital fax, and we see biometric scanners and digital payments in use. Today, we have Apple Pay, facial recognition technology, and fingerprint scanners that let us access money and personal data without ever touching a keypad. Even the obsession with nostalgia was spot on in Back to the Future. Part 2, Marty visits Cafe 80s, a retro-themed diner celebrating the pop culture of the 1980s. And in real life, the 2010s were filled with 80s nostalgia, from the rise of shows like Stranger Things to the revival of old-school arcade games and fashion trends. The movie correctly guessed that people in the future would still be looking back at the past. But of course, Back to the Future. Part 2 also got a few things completely wrong. First on the list, flying cars. According to the movie, by 2015, the skies should have been filled with flying vehicles. In reality, we're still waiting. While companies are developing prototype flying taxis, we're nowhere near having traffic in the skies like in Hill Valley's future. And then there's the infamous hoverboard. Yes, we technically have hoverboards today, but they don't actually hover. They just roll on wheels. True, magnetic hover technology does exist, but it's nowhere near the smooth, effortless floating we see in the movie. Another miss? Jaws 19. In the movie, Hill Valley's future is filled with ridiculous movie sequels, including a holographic ad for Jaws 19. While Hollywood still loves sequels and reboots, we never quite made it to 19 Jaws movies, though with the way things are going, it wouldn't be shocking. And perhaps the biggest thing the movie didn't predict: smartphones and social media. In the movie's version of 2015, people still read newspapers, use fax machines, and rely on payphones. The idea of everyone carrying a touchscreen device with unlimited access to information, social media, and entertainment? Nowhere to be found. Still, even with its inaccuracies, Back to the Future, Part 2 did an incredible job of imagining a future that felt believable. While we may not have flying cars, we do have self-lacing Nikes, digital assistants like Alexa, and artificial intelligence that can predict our behavior. At the end of the day, the movie's vision of the future wasn't meant to be 100% accurate. It was meant to be fun, exciting, and full of possibilities. And in that way, it was completely right. Because no matter what year it is, the future will always be unpredictable and a little bit exciting. Some movies fade with time. Others remain just as fresh, fun, and exciting as the day they were released. Back to the Future is one of those rare films that never gets old, no matter how many times you watch it. But what makes it so special? It's not just the time travel, the DeLorean, or the 80s nostalgia. It's the way the movie perfectly blends adventure, humor, and heart. It's a story about friendship, destiny, and second chances, wrapped in a sci-fi comedy that never takes itself too seriously, but still has emotional weight. Marty McFly is the perfect underdog. A teenager who isn't trying to save the world, just his own future. He doesn't have superpowers. He's not a chosen hero. He's just a kid stuck in the past, trying to fix things before time runs out. And that makes him relatable. Then there's Doc Brown, the eccentric scientist who became one of the most beloved movie mentors of all time. His energy, his wild theories, his chaotic genius. He's the kind of character that sticks with you long after the credits roll. And let's not forget the DeLorean, which transformed from an obscure car into the most legendary time machine ever imagined. It wasn't just a way to travel through time. It was a symbol of adventure, of breaking the rules of reality, of making the impossible happen. But what truly makes Back to the Future timeless is its message. At its core, the movie is about how our choices shape our future. It reminds us that our lives aren't set in stone, that we have the power to change, to grow, to make things better, that even small actions can have massive consequences, and that sometimes taking a chance is the only way to move forward. That's why, nearly 40 years later, people still love Back to the Future. It's why new generations keep discovering it, why fans celebrate it every year, why it continues to be referenced in pop culture, and why no reboot will ever replace the magic of the original. Because some movies don't just entertain us, they become a part of us. So whether it's your first time watching or your 100th, Back to the Future will always be the kind of adventure that makes you believe in the impossible. Thank you for spending your night with Lost at 3 a.m. Sweet dreams, and we'll see you next time.